Memory is not what makes you who you are. I know that sounds wrong. Every therapist, every self-help book, every TED Talk about identity tells you your past shapes you. But there was a man who had no past, not a single retrievable memory, and he was still unmistakably heartbreakingly himself. His name was Henry, and his brain broke the entire theory of identity. In 1953, a 27-year-old man named Henry Molaison walked into a hospital in Hartford, Connecticut, and agreed to let a surgeon remove a small piece of his brain. He had epilepsy, severe, debilitating, life-destroying epilepsy. The seizures had stolen his 20s, his ability to work, to function, to exist as a person in the world. The surgery was experimental, dangerous. The surgeon, William Beecher Scoville, believed that removing the hippocampus, a small curved structure buried deep inside the temporal lobe, would silence the seizures permanently. He was right. The surgery worked perfectly. Henry woke up calm, coherent, recognized the doctors, remembered his childhood, his parents, his life before the operating table. By every visible measure, he was completely himself. There was just one problem. From that moment forward, Henry Molaison could not form a single new memory. Not one. He would have a conversation and forget it within minutes. Eat lunch and have no memory of eating 20 minutes later. Meet someone, shake their hand, exchange names, and the next time that person walked through the door, Henry would greet them as a complete stranger. Every morning he woke up, it was 1953, not metaphorically, literally. His last retrievable memory was the world as it existed before that operating table. Everything after, every experience, every conversation, every single moment of the 55 years that followed, dissolved like smoke the second it formed. Neuroscientists called his condition severe anterograde amnesia. They called him HM in published research, protecting his identity for decades. They studied him for the rest of his life. And they called him, without exaggeration, the most important patient in the history of neuroscience. But here is what the research papers never told you. Henry was kind, not in a vague, general way. Specifically, consistently, recognizably kind. Every researcher who spent years studying him, who he could never remember meeting, described him identically: gentle, patient, good-humored, genuinely curious about the people around him, even though he would forget them completely within minutes. He had a personality, a real one, warm and specific, and entirely his own. And he fell in love, not once, repeatedly, with the same woman. There was a researcher, a woman who worked closely with him for years, and every time she entered the room, something in Henry shifted. He couldn't tell you her name, couldn't tell you he had ever seen her before, but his face changed when she appeared. His posture changed. Something operating beneath the level of conscious memory recognized her, responded to her, reached toward her, in a way that no amount of forgetting could touch. The neuroscientists had a clinical name for this: implicit memory. Emotional and procedural memory stored not in the hippocampus, but in deeper, older, more ancient structures of the brain. The amygdala, the cerebellum, parts so old they predate conscious thought entirely, parts that were feeling and recognizing and loving long before language existed to describe any of it. But here is what that clinical explanation actually means in plain human terms. There is a version of you that exists beneath your memories, not the version assembled from your experiences, not the accumulation of everything that ever happened to you, every relationship, every failure, every defining moment you have carefully organized into the story of who you are. Beneath all of that, beneath the story, there is something older, something that was present before the story began and will remain long after the story ends. Henry couldn't remember falling in love, but he kept falling anyway, over and over, with the same quiet certainty, every single time she walked through the door. Because love, real love, the kind that lives in the body and not just the mind, doesn't need a memory to justify itself. It doesn't need evidence or context or history. It just keeps happening. Like a river that doesn't need to remember where it started to know exactly which direction it's flowing. This is what Henry's broken brain revealed about yours. You have spent your entire life believing you are your memories, that the story of your past is the substance of your identity, that who you are is simply the sum of what you can remember. Neuroscience now disagrees completely. The research that emerged from Henry's case showed that the brain stores fundamentally different kinds of knowing in completely separate locations: conscious memory, emotional memory, procedural memory, relational memory, separate systems.